Hi, and welcome to another digital book talk from Massanutten Regional Library. Today's book talk is for our young adult readers. And today I wanted to share with you, well, a book that I've recently read and really loved, and then my choices went from there. So I want to share with you I Must Betray You by Ruta Sepetys, Walls by Laura Elliott, Dreamland Burning by Jennifer Latham, and Mare's War by Tanita S. Davis. Let's get started. So our first book is I Must Betray You by Ruta Sepetys. This book is a work of historical fiction, and it takes place in Bucharest, Romania during the winter of 1989. For nearly 25 years, Romania's communist dictator Nicolae Ceausescu and his wife, heroine Mother Elena, perpetrated unspeakable human rights abuses on their people. Romanians lived in isolation with lots of rules and fear. They spoke in whispers because their homes were bugged and under surveillance. People spent hours in line for cooking oil or even just a single onion. Possessing a piece of foreign currency, money, was illegal. Wild dogs attacked children in the streets. Families kept an inventory of cigarettes, black market currency to be used for bribes for everyone and everything. And no one was to be trusted. Absolutely no one, because informers were everywhere. Our main character in this story is 17-year-old Christian, and Christian is confronted by the secret police with evidence of his treason. And thus he is blackmailed and coerced by those secret police officers into becoming an informant himself. Christian believes that he can outwit his handler, his secret police handler, and so he has to report to that handler on conversations that he has with others, but also conversations that he overhears, things that he sees. They specifically want him to report on things that he sees and hears when he visits with an American friend who is part of the his parents are part of the diplomatic corps. And so Christian also keeps an illegal notebook, a notebook that he hopes to use to give rise to the voice of fellow Romanians and to expose to the world what is happening in his country. Throughout the story, Christian asks of different people, do they know? Do people know what's really happening here outside of Romania? Do they know? At the end of the book, we have the final uprising. Christian joins into that uprising and follows it from the university square on through to a prison and a hospital and so forth. The worst tortures take place off stage in the story, but the beatings, the mental torment, and the near starvation are all very much front and center. If you've read Fountains of Silence, you may recognize a few of the characters in this book. And out of full disclosure, I will say that I listened to an audio version of the book, and I obtained that copy for free from a service called Libro.fm, and they are giving advanced reader copies of books or listening copies to librarians for free. So thank you, Libro.fm, for your service. Our second book is titled Walls by Laura Elliott. So I picked this one as a read-alike for I Must Betray You. They're both historical fiction. We have characters living under fear and oppression, communism, and so in this story, we are set in Berlin. It takes place in Berlin over the course of 12 crucial months of the Cold War, August 1960 to August 1961. Tensions are building between the United States and the Soviet Union, and it culminates in the sudden erection of the Berlin Wall. So we have two main characters, Drew and his cousin Matthias. Drew is an army brat, and he is now moving for the 6th time in 15 years with his family, and they are moving to West Berlin, where American soldiers like his dad hold an outpost of democracy against communist Russia in Hitler's former capital. Meanwhile, on the other side, in East Berlin, his cousin Matthias has grown up in the wreckage left behind by Allied bombing during World War II, on streets ruled by the Communist Party's secret police. So they come at the Cold War from opposing sides. They don't agree on things, especially at the beginning. They have to overcome their ideological walls to start to become friends. They argue over pretty much everything. They argue over the space race, capitalism, socialism, the American Civil Rights Movement. But they bond over something. They bond over rock and roll, music that is outlawed in Matthias's world. It's outlawed in East Berlin. So they bond over that. Drew shares some things with Matthias, but if Matthias is ever caught with the records and books that his cousin Drew has given him, Matthias will be sent to a work camp for re-education. And of course, there's spies. There's always the informers. And so people are watching them. And as Drew's friendship grows with Matthias, there are those who think that Matthias is not true to his country, and there are those who believe that Drew is not being true to his country. The loyalties of their families to each of their particular parties will be questioned, and their lives will be tested and changed forever. So read Walls to find out more. Our next book today is titled Dreamland Burning by Jennifer Latham. Now, this is a book that I haven't had an opportunity to read yet, but I'm really hoping to get to. Some bodies won't stay buried, and some stories need to be told. The discovery of a skeleton connects the lives of two teenagers a century apart with the brutality and terror of the 1921 Tulsa race riots as part of the background. After 17-year-old Rowan Chase finds a skeleton in an outbuilding on her family's property in Tulsa, she sets out to investigate, figure out who this body is, how long has it been here? Almost 100 years earlier, in Jim Crow-era Tulsa, 17-year-old Will Tillman finds himself at the center of violence and lawlessness on the night that whites looted and burned Greenwood. Greenwood was a thriving African-American community within the larger city of Tulsa. In all, 35 blocks and nearly 1,300 homes and businesses were destroyed that day or that night, and 8,000 black Tulsans lost everything they owned, and at least 300 people died. Both Will and Rowan identify as biracial. Rowan comes from a wealthy family and must face her own class privilege, as well as uncomfortable parallels between the century-old murder mystery that she's trying to solve and present-day race relations in her community and the nation as a whole. This book is told in alternating chapters, so one chapter is Rowan in the present day, the next chapter is Will in 1921 Tulsa, and of course their stories will interconnect because some stories need to be told and some bodies will not stay buried. So our last book today is Mayor's War by Tanita S. Davis. And I chose this as a read-alike for Dreamland Burning for a few reasons, including the African-American characters, but also because of the chapters. So once again, we're going to have chapters where we go back and forth, only this time in Mare's War, we'll go back and forth between present day and the 1940s. So back and forth in time, but we'll still have the same characters showing up. So Mare's War. Meet Mare, a World War II veteran and a grandmother like no other. But do not call her grandma. Mare is not the type. No cookies, no crossword puzzles, and no church choir for this lady. Mare has stiletto heels, a sporty red car, and she is not ready to sit down and be old just yet. Granddaughters Octavia and Tolly really don't want to hang out with Mare all summer long, and they don't want to hang out with each other either. But Mom and Dad have laid down the law. Tolly and Octavia's plans for a perfect lazy summer are ruined, and they are off on the longest cross-country road trip ever with the most opinionated old lady in the world, Grandma Mare. Now Mare, she's got a history, and she has stories about growing up black in 1940s Alabama, stories that Tolly and Octavia have never heard before. Who had any idea that their grandmother lied about her age, ran away from home, and joined the African American Battalion of the Women's Army Corps during World War II? Certainly not these two granddaughters. And that's just the tip of the iceberg, because Grandma Mare has a lot more stories to tell. So if you want to find out what her stories are, you will have to read the book, Mare's War. Thank you for joining me today for a digital book talk from Massanutten Regional Library. Today, we've talked about Walls by Laura Elliott, I Must Betray You by Ruta Sepetys, Dreamland Burning by Jennifer Latham, and Mare's War by Tanita S. Davis. Regardless of which book you choose to read, whether it's one of these or another, I hope that you find something worthy of reading today. Happy reading and enjoy.